The historical specificity of the categories of Marx's critique also emerges clearly in another important section of the Grundrisse entitled Contradiction Between the Foundation of Bourgeois Production, Value as Measure, and its Development. There, Marx outlines what he regards as the essential core of capitalism and its fundamental contradiction. According to Marx here, the category of value expresses the social relations at the heart of capitalism as a form of social life. At the same time, it expresses a determinate form of wealth. Value generally has been understood as a category of the market. Yet Marx's characterization of value as the foundation of bourgeois production suggests it also should be understood as a category of capitalist production itself. This implies that the process of production should be seen as intrinsically related to capitalism. Let me elaborate. Value as a social form, according to Marx, is constituted by the expenditure of direct human labor in the process of production measured temporally. It expresses that which is and remains the underlying foundation of capitalist production. Yet production based on value generates a dynamic that gives rise to a growing tension between this foundation and the result of its own historical development. Capitalism generates enormous ongoing increases in productivity, as a result of which what Marx calls real wealth comes to depend less on labor time than on the general state of science and on the progress of technology. The contrast Marx draws between value and real wealth, between a form of wealth based on labor time and one that doesn't depend on immediate labor time and can be generated by knowledge, clearly indicates that value does not refer to social wealth in general, but is a historically specific form of wealth that is intrinsically related to a historically specific mode of production. Many arguments regarding Marx's analysis of the uniqueness of labor as a source of value overlook this distinction. The Grundrisse indicates, however, that it is irrelevant to argue for or against Marx's labor theory of value as if it were intended to be a theory of the unique properties of labor in general, rather than an analysis of the historical specificity of value as a form of wealth, and hence implicitly of the labor that constitutes it. In the Grundrisse, Marx argues that as the mode of production based on value develops, value becomes anachronistic in terms of the potential of the system of production to which it itself gave rise. The logic of the growing contradiction between real wealth and value implies the possibility of a different process of production, one no longer based on direct human labor. For Marx, then, overcoming capitalism involves the abolition of value as the social form of wealth, which in turn involves a fundamental transformation of the structure of social labor. Yet, although the course of capitalist development generates the possibility of a new liberating structure of social labor, its general realization is impossible under capitalism, according to Marx. Despite value's growing inadequacy as a measure of social wealth, it remains the necessary structural precondition of capitalist society, and this is the basis of capitalism's fundamental contradiction. Marx's notion of the structural contradiction of capitalism, then, should not be identified immediately with class conflict, nor does it refer most fundamentally to a contradiction between private appropriation and socialized production, since production itself is molded by capitalist relations, Rather, Marx's analysis locates a contradiction between the actuality of the form of production constituted by value and its potential, a potential that grounds the possibility of a new form of production. Relatedly, far from entailing the realization of the proletariat, overcoming capitalism would involve the material abolition of proletarian labor. Marx's critical theory, then, should be understood essentially as a critique of labor in capitalism rather than a critique of distribution from the standpoint of labor. At this point, I can briefly outline a reading of Capital based on the considerations developed thus far. As is well known, Capital's point of departure is the commodity. On the basis of the Grundrisse, it now is evidence that the category of the commodity here does not refer to commodities as they might exist in many societies, nor does it express a fictitious historical stage of simple commodity production purportedly antecedent to capitalism. Rather, the category of the commodity here is historically specific. It designates the most fundamental social form of capitalist society. The characteristics of that form, that it is simultaneously a value and a use value, should also be understood as historically specific. The commodity form is constituted by labor, according to Marx. He maintains that labor in capitalism has a double character. It is both concrete labor and abstract labor. Concrete labor is obvious. It refers to the fact that some form of what we call laboring activity mediates the interactions of humans with nature in all society. Abstract labor, however, does not simply refer to labor in general. Rather, it signifies that labor in capitalism has a historically unique social function that is not intrinsic to laboring activity as such. It serves as a kind of a quasi-objective means by which the products of others are acquired.